Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. And got a great crowd here, just lots of folks, way too many to introduce, but team from APD, team from Parks and Rec, many from Parks and Rec. We have our architects in the house and lots of elected officials and community leaders as well. What we're here today to talk about is redoing two parks that have needed some attention for a long time. So I'm going to speak a little bit about that, but before I do that, let me just go through our run of show for today. We're going to hear from Councilor Benton next, then Councilor Davis, and then is Dave Simon floating around? Right here. With the racket, of course. So he's going to wrap it up for us. And so let me start out with a couple of things. You know, when I was a state senator for this district, I used to come by Wilson Park and I would ask the same question everyone who's lived here for generations or who just moved here asks, which is, how come we've never done anything to upgrade Wilson Park? We are finally doing that. That is a great thing. That's right. That is awesome. And when I became mayor, I learned, this is a similar story for a lot of our parks, but there are some that have just been these sort of hallmarks of lack of attention. And the other one is Barelas Park. So we had to pick one to be at. So we're here today, but you can see these are the changes coming to Barelas Park. These are the changes coming to Wilson. And at a high level, I want to let you know that this is basically about us using $1 million of grants, CBDG money that our city councilors and actually our federal delegation and a lot of other folks helped put together. So these are major renovations when it comes to parks. And so what we're looking at is adding a splash pad, going to be right here. Those of you who've seen the one that says, "Our Chavez, this has always been a need. It's so hot. What can we do for our kids?" And splash pads are the way to go. They are a very high return on investment to cool off in the summer. And they're multi-generational. And so what's really cool is you see grandparents out there with kids. And of course, it's a great bridge literally from our grass area to our pool. Now we'll have a spray pad for our youth or our extra young kids. And that is going to really, really make a big difference. We are also adding a new playground. As you can see, there really isn't even one here. So we're going to add that and make this a much more family-friendly place. We're also going to add some fencing, which is much needed for a lot of public safety issues, but also to keep literally the balls and athletic events that go on from rolling into the street and this sort of public safety challenge that we often have there too. And more lighting, which I know we need all over the International District and actually all over Barelas too. And we have 18 new lights coming in Trumbull neighborhood. We also are doing some other things we will announce later when they're ready to go. But we're going to add a lot more lighting at this park, which also helps a lot when it comes to just challenges around the realities, whether it's needles, whether it's abuse, that sometimes unfortunately happens at our parks. Lighting and fencing, and most importantly, more people will reduce that right away, and that's what this is all about. Now, in Barelas Park, we're also adding a new playground. We're adding tennis courts. This came from community input. We're adding some shading structure. I have to give special shout outs to the handball courts. There's only 2 left in Albuquerque, and I am one of no one who plays handball. But believe it or not, if you go to Barelas handball courts at 11 o'clock at night, which is when I go there, they are in full use. It is shocking, actually, when and how those courts are used. And so I'm excited that I'm going to get new courts to play on, too. And the guys that I play with down there, who I've yet to win a game at Barelas handball court, they are shockingly good. So maybe I'll be able to get out there more, too. But let me just say this. These communities have been asking for these upgrades for a long, long time. And I know our Parks and Rec department has always wanted to do this, but they took input with respect to what we should do here from the communities. They also looked at a bunch of different plans and took a lot of feedback. And so this is really a joint project going forward. And it's part of a lot of public infrastructure projects that we're doing through an equity lens. We know that new communities, by definition, get new parks. That's part of how we build a city. But over time, it has created a situation where obviously the parks in newer parts of town are much nicer than the parks in the older parts of town. And so we're prioritizing all our park redos in older parts of town. And of course, that often corresponds with some of our more low-income areas and often many of our more diverse communities. And so this is a big step in terms of reallocating tax dollars to communities that need it the most. So to hear more about these two specific parks and their initiatives, let's start with our city councilor and councilor for the Barelas Park, Councilor Ike Benton.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, I've got a history with the Barelas Park. Years ago, I guess 15 years ago now, we restored the old building, the incredible historic building that's the original community center in Barelas. If you've not seen it, it's worth seeing. True adobe building built under President Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration, I believe it was, or Civilian Conservation Corps. Anyway, a community effort that was during the Depression to really provide something of importance to the community, and that is a well-loved community center. Right across from it, right across the park, is the Barelas Senior Center. So this is a real center of the community, and the park is kind of in between them. We've had funds to remodel the senior center and remodel the community center, but this park renovation has been a long time in coming. And one thing I've always heard from my constituents is, wow, you guys have great lighting down there in that area where the tennis courts are and the handball courts that the mayor mentioned. But the courts are all beat up, and we've got way too many tennis courts and no basketball court. And they've always wanted to have it be a much more multi-use park. And it's an urban park. It's a small patch of green in the middle of Barelas, but truly a center of the community between the park, the two centers. And so the Barelas neighborhood and I really are looking forward to this, moving forward on a plan that really recognizes the desires of the community. And I appreciate Director Simon and his commitment to hearing the community exactly what they want to program at that park. So we'll be moving forward on that. The lighting will still be great, but there'll probably be different activities occurring. And that's going to be a lot of fun. So it's a great use of CDBG funds. This is what they're for. Community Development Block Grant. That's what it means, and we're putting it to good use today. So happy to hear this announcement.
All right, Councilor Davis.
Thanks, Councilor, and thanks, Mayor, and thanks everybody for being here. I think the message we want to carry forward today is that it is not by accident that we're doing this here in Wilson Park, that we're starting this process in Southeast. When the mayor came into office and was pulling his team together, one of the commitments he said was, we want to be sure that we put our investments back into neighborhoods that have felt a little underserved for far too long. And so we started initiating some of those ideas with the community and asking them to step up and trust us that we were listening to their concerns. Some of you were here with us more than a year ago when we met in the library at Wilson Middle School with community members. We came and visited the park and talked to folks who were using it about why they weren't using it more, partnered with the Holy Ghost School across the street about what they might need and how they could use this park to help their students and their kids. And in a year-long process, we've come to this place where by the time Director Simon at Parks and Rec came forward and said, we see a use for this park beyond just a green space. We see it as an activity space, as the neighborhood hub for our kids and for positive activity, partnering with our schools. And that's why you see so many other folks here with us today to talk about improving a park. $1 million ultimately goes into improving this park with all of those new amenities. But it started with community input. And when Dave asked and said, if you'll ask me if I would use our $75,000 of counselor-directed set-aside dollars to get the planning process started, we agreed to do that because we knew at the end of that process, if the community could give us something that we could apply for, we could show amongst all those applications around the country why we could use these funds to improve this neighborhood. And it was that initial funding that helped us get here. But it's also why you see folks like Barbara Peterson from APS on our APS school board, Senator Mimi Stewart, Senator Jerry Ortiz-Pino representing downtown, neighborhood folks like Khadija Bottom, who represents the South San Pedro Neighborhood Association, Tony Johnson, who's been a volunteer and represents our neighborhoods on the city's Parks and Rec board. Like, all of these folks spent more than a year getting community input, and that's why we had the governor visiting here on National Night Out a few weeks ago. Because we're reinvesting in neighborhoods like this, from the mayor helping to direct $3 million to the Trumbull neighborhood for new lighting and new sidewalks and new streets, to new fire infrastructure at AFR a few months ago. All of that as federal, state, city partnerships that we're doing to reinvest in these communities where those dollars are needed more. And I couldn't be prouder to work with our community, the new mayor and our administration and our partners at APS in the state to do that. I think folks in this neighborhood have waited for something like this for far too long. And thanks to Dave and his team, it won't be very long till we get to see that come to reality for next spring. So thank you all for your help, and say thank you to all of our partners for their contribution and help.
All right, and I think we hit on our other elected officials I was going to announce, so thank you all for being here and for demonstrating this concept of One Albuquerque, all of us coming together regardless of the hat that we wear to help our city. And to wrap this up, we want to introduce our Director of Parks, and before I do that too, I just want to also mention there's a lot of folks here who are actually literally taking care of this facility and this park, and so to all the guys out there on the front line, really appreciate it and all the hard work you guys do each and every day. And it's getting cooler out, so it's gonna get better this fall. I know it was a hot summer. And so the individual who sort of quarterbacks all things Parks and Rec, Dave Simon.
All right, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. It's just really wonderful to see this kind of a turnout because it represents the mayor's vision for working together so much to improve our city. So I want to add my thanks to all of our partners, our elected officials and volunteers who really make for successful outcomes when we work together. Thank you, Mayor, for recognizing our hardworking guys in blue. They really do care about Wilson Park and the other parks in the International District, so thank you guys for being here every day. I also want to recognize and thank our other guys in blue, APD. They really are digging in with the community policing strategies that we know are going to lead to a safer city and a better city all the time. So we're looking forward to strengthening that partnership with APD as part of rejuvenating this park as well. Lastly, I would like to really recognize and thank our partners in the Family and Community Services Department. They administer the Community Development Block Grant Program, and we felt like we had some great ideas for meeting the goals of that program, which is to reinvest in our communities, build communities, and lift people and places up. And they saw the merits of some of these ideas, and it's that program, the CDBG program, that is going to fund the renovations of these two parks. So I want to thank Family and Community again very much. I will say also that we're extremely excited to strengthen our partnership with Albuquerque Public Schools. When schools and parks come together, great things really happen. And Wilson and Barelas Parks, you know, they are more than just green spaces that are physically in the center of two of our great iconic neighborhoods. Wilson and Barelas Parks are really heart and soul centers of these two communities. And working with all of our partners, we're going to strengthen that so much. We're going to bring that heart and soul back as best we can in these two wonderful, iconic city neighborhoods. And to Principal T.C. Reiser, who's here, and I'm not sure where she went. She might be back instructing in school, but we're so excited to strengthen that partnership across and around this fence. You know, one of the things we're very excited about is that part of the Wilson Park renovation project includes restoring and rejuvenating these tennis courts here. And we're just overjoyed that this fall, the Wilson Middle School tennis team, the Wildcat Middle School tennis team is back.
Go Wildcats.
And they go Wildcats. And they have over 20 kids now enrolled in the after-school middle school tennis program. And this is great news for the school. It's great news for the International District. And you know, it could be great news for tennis. Who knows? The next Coco Gauff may be right over there in that school. So I'm really looking forward to getting on the court and suiting up with the Wildcats. So I'm hoping for an invitation. And Mayor, I know you would pretty much clean my clock in handball, but maybe you and I can get out there together and lift each other up in tennis. So at any rate, thank you all so much for coming. Look for the progress over the next year, and we're excited about these two places in Albuquerque that mean so much to us and are going to be tremendously improved a year from today. Thanks so much for coming.
All All right, what we'll take a few questions, then if there's more, we'll just, chat one-on-one. So, questions for the group?
Can you talk about maybe plans for the future if other parks are going to get renovations as well?
Well, there's a lot in the bond issue that's coming up in November. And so for any enthusiast of parks and in general, it's important for our city for a number of reasons. There's a whole host of tens of millions of dollars allocated for park improvements in there. One shining star that I'll tell you we're looking at, and it hasn't gone to council yet, but we are very interested in a wholesale redo of Los Altos. And that would be something, again, long overdue, et cetera. But we think we have a way to do it. But stay tuned for more on that. And of course, we do have a new pool, renovated pool. So we did the most expensive thing already.
Can you talk about the history of crime or homelessness at these two parks and how these renovations might change that?
Yeah, these two parks, look, we understand the realities that these are two parks that are also in many ways infamous for sometimes homelessness and, often various drug use and things like that. We know that no matter how you cut it, taking back, reclaiming this public space for our community is actually more about getting the public to use the facility. And then, of course, on the other end, we got to find places to deal with addiction and with homelessness. And so these two things go together. And I appreciate that question because we want to address both sides of that equation. Today, what we're talking about is making this a place where families can come and gather at all hours of the day and every day of the week. That is going to take care of a lot of these issues, but also on the bond issue in November, of course, is a huge civic investment in our homeless challenges. And I will tell you that the question is, well, if more people are using the parks and folks aren't camping out here, where do they go? Well, until we build that facility that is on the ballot in November, there is nowhere with no gate or no questions asked 24/7 to go. But there will be if we pass that and follow through with getting matching funding from our state legislators, heads up. We are going to have something like every other city has, which is a clearinghouse 24/7 to take folks who are in need. Let's get a round of applause for the homeless clearinghouse idea. Someone over there was giving it to me. Thanks.
There's a mention of locking gates, at least for Wilson, and I know there was a plan for that at Loveland as well. Is that something that might come to several parks in the future? Is it too soon to know?
What I might say is, and I got to kind of flag on a time check, so I'm going to answer, but redirect to Dave Simon after. But in general, we want to really experiment with gates. We know that we want our parks to be open, number one, first and foremost, and so we will never change that. But when parks close, how we gate them, like where the entrances are, is even something that's really important. And we see that that's a method of best utilization that also is probably different for every location. So some parks might have a different gating setup, some parks might not have any. And stay tuned for more on that because I do know council actually helped us with some funding for safety and gating, but know that parks are always open to the public. All right, so for more on that, talk elsewhere. I've got to run. Appreciate everyone, and everyone's available at their own request after as well. Thank you so much.